Timbuktu. We say, from here to Timbuktu, as if it means distant and unknowable. But what was Timbuktu really? For centuries, European maps marked it as a desert treasury, a city of gold somewhere beyond the Sahara. Stories claimed its streets glittered with wealth, that caravans arrived and never left empty-handed. But gold wasn't mined there. Instead, it passed through its markets, and not into hidden vaults and treasuries. Timbuktu sat where boats on the Niger River met camel caravans from the Sahara. Salt could move south, gold could move north. Merchants, jurists, and scholars moved with them. Timbuktu wasn't rich because of what it possessed. It was rich because of what passed through it. The city didn't rise from emptiness. It stood near the bend of the Niger River, just south of the Sahara's advancing edge. Close enough to the desert to receive caravans, but close enough to the river to connect with the inland delta and communities in that area. To the north lay the salt mines of Tagaza, where salt slabs were cut from the desert floor and loaded onto camelbacks. To the south stretched the gold-producing regions of the savannah, where dust and nuggets entered long-distance trade. The river made bold transport possible, while the desert made long-distance exchange necessary. And Timbuktu sat between them, not only as a producer, but as a broker. In the dry season, lines of camels forming caravans appeared on the horizon, each carrying rectangular slabs of salt. By the time they reached the city's edge, the animal shadows stretched long across the sand, and brokers were already waiting. But caravans did not come for the landscape. They came because this was where the desert routes met navigable water. And when this traffic concentrates, markets form and institutions follow. Markets turned from simple barter hubs into trade centers requiring warehouses. Warehouses required courts and guards to settle debts. And courts required the schools that would eventually define the city's soul. We see Timbuktu grow not from what it extracted, but from what it was able to coordinate. As surplus accumulated, reputation followed. Scholars gathered, and the manuscripts multiplied. Trade didn't just build warehouses, it built authority. And such trade density produced legal density, which required scholars. In shaded courtyards, students bent over wooden boards and loose folios, spent hours copying legal formulas line by line while merchants negotiated outside the mosque walls. Jurists trained in Islamic law settled these commercial disputes, while teachers instructed the merchants' sons. Copyists reproduced text that regulated contracts, inheritance, and credit. The city's intellectual life did not float above its economy. It was financed by circulation. And as caravans continued to converge, Timbuktu's name spread. Not because it hoarded gold, but because it coordinated movement across the Sahara. But coordination depends on forces beyond any single city. A city built on circulation does not control circulation. Caravan routes depend on security and negotiated passage across tribal territories. They also depend on stable empires that protect movement rather than disrupt it. If conflict rises along a corridor, traffic thins. If another node offers lower risk or lower taxation, merchants adjust. And if maritime routes along the Atlantic become more efficient, inland exchange narrows. Timbuktu didn't control the gold fields. It didn't control the salt mines. It didn't manufacture what it traded. Its prosperity depended on being the most efficient meeting point between systems. As long as desert caravans and river transport converged, surplus accumulated. When that convergence weakened, so did the surplus that financed courts, teachers, and jurists. At its height, Timbuktu functioned as a clearing point between worlds. Salt, gold, textiles, and enslaved people moved through these corridors. Caravans arrived in seasonal waves, camels loaded with goods and textiles from the north, and the river boats carried grain, cola nuts, and gold dust from the south. But traffic didn't move randomly. It moved rhythmically, timed to climate, politics, and caravan cycles. In that rhythm, Timbuktu found stability. So long as desert and river systems aligned, the city sustained surplus without producing the commodities itself. But rhythms can be interrupted. From the late 15th century onward, two pressures began to narrow inland trade. First, Atlantic maritime routes expanded. European ships accessed West African gold directly along the coast. Trade that once moved north across the Sahara increasingly moved west toward the ocean. Second, political stability along caravan corridors weakened. When imperial protection thinned, security costs rose. Neither shift erased Timbuktu overnight, but each reduced the density of convergence. Merchants recalculated risk. A caravan leader weighing his options did not think in myths or loyalties. He counted camels, guards, distance, and taxes. If another route offered lower danger or lower duty, he turned his line elsewhere. And fewer caravans meant thinner margins. Thinner margins meant reduced surplus, and reduced surplus strained the institutions built upon it. Then, in 1591, Moroccan forces entered the region, seeking control over gold routes and trade taxation. The invasion did not destroy a golden treasury. It destabilized a brokerage system already under pressure. Once the efficiency advantage narrowed, Timbuktu lost its brokerage edge. It became another trade node among many, no longer the most efficient meeting point between river and desert. Timbuktu didn't vanish. Even as its commercial dominance narrowed, its scholarly life endured for generations. It did not lose its importance in a single campaign. What changed was flow. When desert caravans thinned and Atlantic routes absorbed more traffic, the city's brokerage narrowed. The institutions built on circulation adapted, but they couldn't command the systems that sustained them. We remember Timbuktu as a city of gold because gold is easy to imagine. Vaults, treasure, hidden wealth in desert sands. But its brilliance was never accumulation. It was coordination between trade and law. A city that sat between ecological systems and made movement possible across them. Timbuktu's story is not about buried treasure. It is about how cities thrive when they align with trade, and how vulnerable they become when that trade shifts. Without caravans, Timbuktu wouldn't have been poor. It wouldn't have been a city. We remember it as a place of gold, but it thrived on circulation, and circulation is never permanent. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing. And if I missed something in the video, let me know in the comments below. Cheers. Bye.